Ladies and gentlemen, it is now 6 o'clock. Well, maybe just 30 more seconds. But I'm very happy to see so many people already online. We have many conductors who have been participants in the Bucharest Music Institute International Masterclass and competition for conductors. Enrique, Andrea, many others are already here. Roman is here. Michael Cheng is here. Everybody's coming on. And plus, we have a lot of newcomers. And what I'm particularly happy about is that we are able to offer these CMO great maestros repertoire masterclasses with great maestros for free, offering this education, access, and opportunity for a very growing community of conductors with Conductors Masterclass Online. And Joann, it was your inspiration to help us move in this direction, and it was such a smart decision. And I'm so glad that we've been able to get the funding support to be able to offer these masterclasses online for free. So everybody who has joined us, I can share with you a very warm welcome to the great maestra, Joann Falletta. Let me just say a few words about Joann if people aren't even aware of her, but I think you are because everybody signed up because of Joann. Anyways, you know, she was music director of the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra, Virginia Symphony Orchestra, principal guest conductor of the Brevard Music Center of North Carolina. She's guest conducted over hundreds of orchestras in North America, many European, Asian, South American, African orchestras, including my orchestra in Sevilla, which I invited her to. She served as the principal conductor of the Ulster Orchestra, where she made her debut at the Proms. She has been a recipient of the Seaver National Endowment of the Arts Conductors Award, winner of the Stokowski competition, Toscanini, Ditson, Bruno Walter Conducting Award. She was the first female conductor to lead a major American ensemble upon her appointment as music director of the Buffalo Philharmonic. She's received 12 ASCAP awards, maybe even more since this biography. She's been on the U.S. National Council of the Arts, member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. She's a champion of American music. She's done 500 works by American composers. She's won Grammy Awards with her Naxos recordings, including the Respighi, which is a fantastic recording, which I encourage everybody to participate by actually downloading this recording through Apple Music or Spotify or whatever format or platform you use. Joann, this is an extraordinary honor for us that we can welcome you to the Conductors Masterclass Online. Great maestros repertoire masterclass, and you have decided to share with us 2 out of the 3 of the Roman trilogy pieces by Ottorino Respighi, probably the greatest 20th century Italian composer, and certainly for many, one of the great 20th century composers. There is no doubt that the Pines of Rome, Fountains of Rome, are one of the great pleasures and masterworks and showpieces, both for a conductor and for an orchestra, with a lot of musicians on the stage. And so, without further ado, with everybody now online, I would like to welcome Joann Falletta. Joann, tell us a little bit about Respighi. Tell us a little about your own experience. It's showtime. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, and welcome to everyone. I am so glad to see many of your faces, people that I have met, people that I know well, and people that I'm just meeting. So thank you for taking this time and being flexible about the snowstorm in Buffalo where I had to change the date. But yes, when John asked me what I'd like to talk about, I wanted to talk about pieces that I love, passionately love. And I thought about all the Respighi, the Rome trilogy, but these 2 in particular. And just briefly about Respighi, he was writing these for a very strong reason. He wanted to encourage young Italian composers to really spend more exploration of writing orchestral music. Of course, they were all opera composers, and that was what had been so important for decades, even centuries. But he felt that, as he did personally, that the orchestra was a great vehicle for them. And for a very personal reason, because of the troubles in Italy at that time and the lack of unification and difficulties, that the Italians should remember their heritage, remember what we have, remember the Roman Empire. Let's remember how glorious we were, what we did for history, the things that we introduced to the world then. let's celebrate those. And he did them so brilliantly in the three Rome pieces. Now, Feste Romane is also a ton of fun, but I picked these two because I think that they could make for you in your programming a beautiful second half and work very well that way with the fountains followed by the pines. It's a perfect length, and it's the pieces are quite different so that they complement each other, but extraordinarily beautiful. Just don't make the mistake that I almost did once in when I asked an orchestra that I thought it might be a good idea to go right from the fountains into the pines. I thought that would be sort of, haunting just to keep that atmosphere. And all of the woodwind players looked up from their stands like, no. So I never did that. So don't try it. It's not a good idea. But also one last warning is before we go in detail is that Respighi on the page can look very simple. It looks, oh yeah, this fits and there's a triplets and then, so it's actually much more difficult to get everything to work. So just remind yourself of that, allow enough time to realize that there's a lot going on. We start with the fountains. And the beautiful thing about these Rome pieces is that Respighi blurs a lot of lines. He's blurring the line of when. Now, the Valle Giulia could be back in the day of the Roman Empire, or it could have been in Respighi's time, or any time in between. Timeless. It's definitely in the past sometime, and it hasn't changed. It probably hasn't changed in like 200 or 300 years. It's been exactly the same. So there's this wonderful blurriness about when. We know it's dawn, so it begins so softly, and I want to encourage people to keep it flowing. Very often you start a piece and you're thinking of it and you're so in love with it, and then you realize this is too slow. Don't do that. I mean, keep the idea of the flow going. Think about the flowing of this piece before you start. But the sense of simplicity is very important. You look at the second violin line, we should hardly hear that. We should hardly hear it. And what happens in orchestras is that you'll hear almost always a little sense of a crescendo to the top and diminuendo. See if you can get them to let that go. Just completely on one plane so that it's almost like a murmur. I mean, it is. It's probably a stream that Respighi is thinking about, something like that. It's a murmur. It doesn't have a crescendo and come back, but you need to ask for that. Very, very soft, very non-pulsed. Just keep flowing in a really pianissimo dynamic. Then the winds come in. And if you can keep that going, the beautiful thing about the winds is that they are like natural creatures there. They're not instruments. They're some bird, some sound, some rustle. So the thing you don't want to have is something being too rhythmic in music like this at this point. You want it to be free. That takes musicians a little while just to experiment with it. I usually encourage them by saying, as long as we line up on the bar lines, that we meet each other on the bar lines, in between, you can be flexible. Some people can do that instantly and love it. Some people are a little shyer about it, but I think you should think that way, that these are bird calls. These are bird calls. They're not anything that needs to be, a dotted quarter note followed by 3/8. No, it's something completely free. And the more free they can be in the context of the bar lines, the more beautiful it is. So you have the oboe, the cello coming in, all of these small things, small sounds, small natural sounds, a cuckoo, whatever you imagine it could be. Be careful of his crescendo diminuendo. Make sure to do the diminuendos. I've always found this especially important in Respighi. Crescendos are easier. Diminuendos people don't pay much attention to always. So do that, because the kind of breathless quality you get in any piece when you make a diminuendo is so beautiful. And there's a tendency in a piece like this to want to slow down at the end of each phrase. But the better option, I think, is changing the color. Otherwise, you'll find you're always slowing down. I mean, we all succumb to that a little bit, dee da, dee da. but maybe once in a while, right? Once in a while, better to change the color, better to use diminuendo than retard. Can I just say that as a kind of something forever? It's better to use a change of color like a diminuendo rather than too many retards. Now, when you get to number one, this is one of my favorite spots. We sort of get a little bit more sound, right? But things are waking up. We came from the dawn, and maybe the sun is coming up. And um, this is so beautiful in these low woodwinds and the horn. But very often you can't hear the eighth notes. The musicians might sing on the longer notes and then swallow up the eighth notes. Encourage them, sing on each eighth note, give weight to the eighth notes. The bottom of the phrase here is what you want to hear, always those eighth notes. The entrance of the double bass is beautiful, and Respighi is so sensitive. He writes four after one, um, two solos, but make sure they're heard. Sometimes the double basses can be so discreet, it just depends on your hall. If your hall gives some presence to the bass line, that's good. You probably could ask for more, right? You could ask for more in two double basses because it's a beautiful new register of sound that's coming in. When I go on after this is after one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bars, I always feel like, okay, now we're sort of fully awake. We're fully awake. This is a new character. It's a fresh character, maybe a tiny bit faster, but also a little bit more, bodied than it was at the beginning, which was just like veiled. Now all of a sudden we can get some freshness in there, and I usually do that by just picking up the tempo slightly. A lot of times, when you have these long phrases, like where the piccolo comes in, just where I was talking about, 6 after 1, you have a 5-bar phrase. Be very conscious of that, because I think human beings are so used to 4-bar phrases that we tend to get through the 4th bar, and then we have like a tag bar. But that's not what we need here. It's actually 6 if we go all the way through. So this 6-bar phrase, make sure you sing through it. And I think what can really help you is if you elongate in the 4th and 5th bar the dotted quarters, so that there's no space in between that. You keep going from the end of the 3rd bar into the 4th, into the 5th. That's the danger point when you go from the 4th into the 5th, the feeling that you keep going. In the meantime, there's like little details, just even the second violins, that tiny little grouping before 2, 3 and 4 before 2, so beautiful to bring that out when it goes from going back and forth to a little scale passage, just to hear all of those things. Respighi is the master of orchestration, so everything he does is meaningful and beautiful. The oboe solo, the bassoon solo, this is just something to notice. The oboe solo 2 before 2 has a slur over it. In my score, unless you've got a revised score, there is no slur over the bassoon solo. Why? I'm not sure. I mean, is it a big deal? No, but it's good to know. Maybe he wanted the bassoon to be a little bit more pointed to come out of the texture. But again, everything he did was for a reason. Act 2, the same kind of thing. Let's not hear every beat there. Let's not hear every beat in the strings. So it's like one gesture, die, I, with the diminuendo, die, I. That's beautiful. You don't worry. Sometimes we worry so much about orchestras getting lost. I think they don't get lost if you show them the phrase. I find that that's what they need. They need to know where it's going. They don't really need to see the points as much as where it's going. So I like both of those phrases in the strings at 2, to just play them as one gesture, and going on, poco più mosso. This is after 2, 3 bars, always going towards the end, but with a diminuendo. So they just lift up. They're never covering the oboe. I love this little hemiola, if you can hear it. This is after 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1 and 2 and 3. And after we've heard so much 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we have a hemiola. I like to bring that out. I like to bring that out. And again, it can be very subtle. The magic here, if we look on the English horn going to the clarinet solo, this is after 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, going into 10, is simply the change of color. I mean, and that's what Respighi is all about. That was one of his greatest gifts, is imagining color and creating color. So going from that English horn into the clarinet, I like to tell the person who's giving it to the next line, the next soloist, is that they should disappear into the next solo, and the next solo should start from nothing and come out. So there's that one magical moment when we're hearing English horn and clarinet and flute at the same time. And it's like an irreplicable mixture of colors. And then somehow the English horn is gone and the clarinet comes out. So those connections can be so beautiful. It's not just now it goes there. It's they sort of meld for a moment. One decreases, one increases, and you get a beautiful sound. There's more hemiolas before 3. Now 3 is a very magical spot. I mean, when I come to 3, I usually stop beating. You might have to explain this to an orchestra that, that I'm not going to beat that bar. I'm just going to let that kind of glimmer. That's what it does. It just glimmers. The violins and the sound of that. It's like this time. It's time. There's no time. There's no time. If you have a spot where you can make it feel like time stands still, that's one of those spots. Don't beat. Don't beat. I'm always teasing myself about conductor solos. When absolutely nothing is happening except beauty, we probably don't need to see that. So you explain to the orchestra, we just stop at that moment and time stands still. Then the flute goes on. I love the way he starts to introduce the horns very softly, but this is kind of like a presentiment of what's coming up with the Triton fountain coming up just a little bit, just he's getting ready for a big horn event. You hear them, and then again the oboe. Sometimes, this is the ending of the first movement. He does this echo, and I think it's quite nice. Piano, più piano for the oboe. It's nice again, color change. Piano, più piano for the clarinet, and then the clarinets actually don't cut off. The wonderful thing about Respighi is kind of cinematic. The Valle Julius fades out somehow. I mean, slowly fades out. And all of a sudden, we're in the middle of Rome. And there's this merman playing a Triton, playing a seashell, as a Triton is playing the seashell. But the clarinets actually connect us into that. This piece is all about connections. I mean, he was cinematic in a way that was so ahead of his time. So it just blends. The clarinets cut off once the horns come in, and this is a really great moment. The horns really play out. But I wrote to myself, be careful not to play too loudly, because I'm looking at 2 before 4. Yeah. Or a 4, where it's triple forte, right? So this is fortissimo. Just keep in mind that there is going to be a higher point for the horns, so they can't give everything there. You need probably, as I found this, to insist on that crescendo in the piccolo, in the percussion, and in the horns, and in the violins. Really make it a big crescendo. Don't slow down. 1, 2, 3, off. But a big crescendo, something dramatic. And then this is interesting. He has that fermata on the rest in the 4th bar of the Triton fountain. and it's in the morning. This is full morning, so this is full sun, and it's in the middle of Rome, and it really is in the middle. If you go to see that place, there's traffic all around it. You know, John, there's a lot of traffic, and there's this fountain. But
I think all the Italians on this chat probably know that.
yes. So I mean, it's glorious, but I'm not so sure that we should treat those two fermatas in the same way. I like the first one to be longer because remember, if you didn't know the piece, many people don't know the piece, you'd be shocked by those horns. You would be shocked. So you just got, whoa, what was that? So you can take a moment. Don't do exactly the same length the next time. You know, sometimes I think it's better not to repeat things just because they look exactly the same. Make the next one a little shorter. So you're, yeah, we heard it. We're ready. Let's go. And then you get into this big moment of four. But this is like a miracle, I think, of fountains because all of the writing, piano, harps, it sounds exactly like that, like a burst of water. I mean, how this man knew how to make that so real. It's extraordinary. So then once you keep going at four, I made a note to myself not to diminuendo too soon. And I don't know if you found this, probably a lot of conductors have found this. I'm looking after four, third bar four. A triple forte, this is diminuendo. So most orchestras play triple forte, and by the next bar, they're playing mezzo forte or mezzo piano. I mean, you don't want that. You want it to take time. I mean, you've got to have that come down only to piano after 4 bars. So I usually tell them, no, don't diminuendo too soon. Keep playing, take your time with the diminuendo so that you have someplace to go, even from the piano that's coming up to the pianissimo at un poco meno, right? So time your crescendos and diminuendos. Make sure it doesn't happen too quickly. Generally, they do, and then you have no place to go. I would stay right in tempo here. Yeah, I mean, up to you. I'm going against what he says. This un poco meno, or maybe it gets a little slower in getting softer, and that's okay. But I wouldn't be too slow on this wonderful this is so brilliant scherzando section coming up in the un poco meno. It's just a sparkle. I mean, it's truly a sparkle. You can see the sun shining on the water of that fountain. I mean, just glistening on that fountain, and all the little celeste piano, all of those little things we hear in between. When we get to 5, yeah, you be careful because I find generally that seconds and violas are too loud, quite a bit too loud for the firsts, which have the main melody and which is lighthearted and leggero, right? So you don't want to lose that quality. And when the violins and violas, seconds and violas start playing, they really generally start to play that quite heftily. It says più vivo. Maybe a little, but I always feel more or less the same is okay. I mean, because you're relying now on different dynamics. He has, and be careful with this because sometimes it just gets loud by accident. 4 bars of piano, sudden mezzo forte. It's like a spurt. I mean, and that's what he's doing. That like the spurt comes out of a different part of the fountain. Sudden mezzo forte, back to piano. So that can be extremely dramatic, but you have to be listening for it because you might not get that unless you point it out to them. After 5, 8 bars, no, this is 7. I like to put a little accent on on each triplet, just so it stands out of the tempo. And it's really partly because of the register of the first violin. Sometimes first violins playing in the middle of the staff or below don't project as well as they think they do out into the house. So a little bit of an accent, and then the animando. Yeah, that's where you can start moving. That's why maybe I made the decision at 5. Don't change the tempo. Save it for animando. So And that is, a very graceful thing. Don't forget the pianissimo that happens 4 before 6. I mean, he's working with color, but he's working very much with dynamics, really, really specific dynamics. I love that at 6, there is no crescendo into that. That again is like an astonishing spurt of the fountain, and it will look at the harps and what they're doing, the harps and the piano. I mean, they're going in different directions from each other, the piccolo, the clarinet. You hear all of that, but it has to sound like a waterfall. And that can happen if you don't make any crescendo. I wrote no crescendo twice in my score to remind myself, and then really forte, and that one bar, and then back. Then the next time he lets you do a crescendo, and that feels natural. Do that. That's second of 6, fourth of 6. All of these details make Respighi shine. They're all in there, but sometimes it's not so easy to hear them all. And that goes on a lot of the same gestures, the little triplets and the first violin that can come out a little bit. Watch the sforzandos. This is a nice thing before 7, for 8 before 7, for a forte, and then a little sforzando, meaning that the downbeat has to be pulled back, right? If you're going to play sforzando in those woodwinds on the third beat, they have to then pull away on the downbeat, so you get that sense of difference. Oh, and this is nice. This is can be a little treacherous for the trumpets. I'm looking at 4 before 7, because they're playing together. I mean, they're focused on playing together. I would say this is a place not to move too much, right? Let them lock in and let them play that with a crescendo. They'll give you a beautiful crescendo, especially if you can kind of rely on crescendo to get you to 7. And then 7 can be a little faster, right? So all of these slight differences in tempo are important. Sometimes I made the mistake of playing a lot of this as not paying attention to these small tempo changes. And I realized that's the magic. These small tempo changes are important. Just the little brightening right here of 7, più vivo ancora, right? Still faster. Be careful at 7. Very, very hard to hear the pizzicato in the seconds. I always regret that. But you just have to ask them to play out. I mean, sometimes pizzicato is so perfect, but very few people hear it. Then on the bottom, it's very hard to hear. This pianissimo is definitely not going to work there with all of that coming from the harps and the piano. So I put mezzo forte. You might even need to think forte. Another spot that is so fabulous is after 7, the clarinet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. Again, he writes piano. I think he's writing piano or even pianissimo, but that is too great to cover up. I think you can bring that out. And even the both clarinets when they're playing in the next few bars, beautiful to hear. I love to bring out the melody here. This is before 8. 4 before 8, the melody coming from the bass clarinet and the bassoon and the cello. What a beautiful sound together. I mean, it's just so beautiful. And you can sing through all of that. You can sing. So I ask them to sustain as much as possible so that they're not playing downbeats, that they're playing an aria in that register. Sing through the whole dotted half note. Keep singing through the half notes. Sing through the tie across the bar line. And that really gives it kind of this grand quality. Doesn't have to move too much right away. We can enjoy that. I would say start moving at 8. And again, that is just amazing with all of the harps and the piano going like this. I do a poco retard, but I think I slow down a little later because I find this is after 8. If you start slowing down 7 after 8, you're going to get more than you want. And all of a sudden it's going to be quite ponderous, like, really, I didn't really want it that way. So I almost always ask musicians to do something like that 1 bar later, do the retard 1 bar later. And then it can be quite dramatic, right? You can be quite dramatic and then yeah, once we get to all of those arpeggios in the flute and the clarinets, ask them to play all the way to the bottom. Sometimes you hear them brilliantly coming in, and then you don't hear the end of it. And it's great to hear the bottom of it. It's really nice. So you know, use your judgment from what you hear, but I think a lot of times we miss that. I like the way at 9, you know, we should observe his staccato. Yum, tum bum. Yeah, that's see what else. Oh, and then you have, you know, the trumpets again. This is very beautiful too. This is the before the end, before we melt into the next fountain. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 before the end. Again with the trumpets, they're playing with each other. I would say just kind of leave them alone. They do that, but give them the sense that it's not actually that they're getting softer. It's that we are walking away from them. And as we walk away from them, we actually start missing notes. So you notice the last one, we only hear da 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 da, but da 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 is there. We just couldn't hear it. So that's the sense that we're walking, we turn around and we're going on to see the next fountain. Because that highlights this kind of cinematic blending into a very different place. And this is the Trevi Fountain, which everybody has seen probably, but if not, you've seen a picture of it. It's magnificent. And it's in the middle of the day. I mean, this is a majestic fountain. What is very nice at the beginning of this is to hear a little bit of the change of the trill of the first violin, which is trilling from a C to a D flat, which really worked for the end of the last moment. But then somehow he changes it to D natural. We should hear that because that's kind of like a signal for something very different. You know, we're in a different place now. I usually like this is just something I do, and it's not in the score, but to start this under tempo. It's almost like it's unfolding in front of us. So I not allegro moderato at the beginning. I wait until the horns and the clarinets come in, and then I move it. Especially moving it after 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then I move it because it's kind of nice. We come back to piano. We can't miss that. We have to come back to piano because we're going to build up again. And then in building up the crescendo, we can also take advantage of accelerando because those help each other and they're more natural that way. So once we get to that piano, then we have to be thinking forward, 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 and we just make that crescendo happen into the new tempo. So yeah, we get to a new tempo. 168, I think, is very, very fast. I'm looking at number 11. So I mean, you could do it, I think, anywhere from 144 to 152. 168 is really fast for details, you know, because there's a lot going on there. And you want to get the sense of the sort of majesty of the brass too, because you know the Trevi Fountain, you would get the feeling of well, we maybe we go back to ancient Rome because all of a sudden we get the feeling of well, who was the king of the sea? Neptune, or Poseidon. There he is, you know, with his chariot, and he's got all of these, you know, sea creatures pulling his chariot. I mean, it's like amazing. I mean, but it's majestic, and the trombones carry that off so well. This is 11, so yeah. I wrote to myself, let the brass have nobility, and that's what I think is important. You're trying to get a sense of the nobility of that fountain, which is really overwhelming. So be careful of the tempo. There are all little details that again, depending on how many strings you have or what the whole is like, you might not hear. After 11, 10 bars, the horns, yata-ta-tim, or the trumpets and the trombones, yata-ta-dum, ta-dum. All of those little things should kind of poke out of the texture. And depending on what you hear, you might want to ask for a little bit more. This is something that, you can ask at 12, your bass trombone and your tuba player. Yes, it's accented, but why don't we change those accents to a kind of tenuto? So we have weight, but we also have length. It's not sharp. Or I could say to them, try and still keep the cantabile quality in that melody. All of a sudden, it's not a march. It's still the majesty of this god and his court, his undersea world. Again, lots of little things poking out. The third and fourth of 12, those are fantastic things to hear from the trombones and the low winds going on, same sorts of thing. Yeah, this two piatti is always at 1 before 13. I think it looks like it should be crashed, but it's not. But he wants a crescendo, so it may be just a single piatti with a crescendo. Now, okay, the thing is, if you've enjoyed that slightly more majestic tempo, you have to get yourself out of it, right? You have to get yourself back to it. 13 is where it happens, so you start to move there. And you have to move pretty quickly, because by 14, you've got to be fully in a fast tempo in 1. You've got to be in 1, probably a couple of bars before. We'll talk about that. One of the things that I find is very helpful about changing tempo is not to change it in the first bar of a phrase. So here you've been singing right before 13, you've got your low brass singing, and then at 13, don't change the tempo right away. The first bar of 13 should be in that same tempo. I love to have these phrases overlap. So this tempo goes into this tempo, and then that moves. If you move right at the new phrase, I think it's too obvious. This is more kind of blended somehow together. So once you get to 13, you're thinking, okay, I better start moving now. So you just move, try and do it as organically as possible. So not a lot too soon. Probably better the other way. I think you probably will regret it more, as has happened to me, that if you make a lot of accelerando and then you can't do anymore, and it seems to become static. You don't want that. You don't want to create a static point where you're just kind of spinning your wheels and nothing happens. So better to err on the side of waiting, and then in those last 4 bars before 14, go for it, right? Now, at some point, I usually feel comfortable going in 1 before I get to 14. Just a sort of 1. 2 before 14, maybe 1 before 14. I find that it's just somehow more organic, again, to make a transition where you don't change things in the first bar. So if you're already conducting in 1 before 14, then you're right there. You're right there, and it feels so great. And there's no change. There's just a lot of brass. I mean, the horns are singing, the trombones are singing. Sometimes it's hard to hear. It's actually hard to hear certain things. Like after 14, I always have to encourage the trumpets to come out, second and third bar. Encourage second and third trombone in the fourth bar to keep singing, because like the first trombone has dropped out. So be careful of the balances there. You don't want to lose the weight of the brass. And you still want them to be singing. This crescendo is very important coming up after 14, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Sometimes they don't do it, without real encouragement. And even if they have to come back maybe on the upbeat to that bar, that crescendo is very important, because then it leads to a big moment for trumpet and trombone. And that's it. I just keep going all in 1, and it's just it's it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I asked the trumpets to make a little bit of a crescendo going into 15, and I've always liked that. Um, and after 15, and you continue just in rhythm, forte piano in the trumpets is very important, right? So that you can hear cello and bass and the bass trombone uh, playing that, or third trombone playing that. Um, it's hard to hear the piccolo. I mean, you can ask them to bring that out as much as possible. This is one before largamente. And then the way I have structured that is that my one becomes one beat.
Mm.
And it somehow to me feels organic that largamente is just twice as slow. Um, this is very beautiful. It's just a very grand moment. Um, you need to remind them to sing on the bottom, and you don't get it for free. Sing on the bottom, you hear a lot at the top, and then it disappears, and then they come out again. But if you remind them, we need to hear that bottom, and he gives them some time. They've got the whole quarter note with a tie. Let's make sure we hear that. And then the brass is just bringing out that theme, which is so it's fantastic. Um, uh, and then there's a diminuendo. I mean, just again, be cautious about that. You don't want to wind up with the trumpets playing mezzo piano before 16, 8 bars. No, I mean it's better to keep it louder a little longer, and then have that happen even after 16. You've got a very long way. And again, it's just a question of, well, either you are walking away from the fountain or the time of the day is changing, which it definitely is. But uh, just later is better, right? Don't give it away all at once. This is, it goes on. Let me just see if this is important right before 17 to make sure third and fourth horn come out. That's a hard thing to hear. And depending on your players, but it's just the register that makes it a little bit hard. In fact, I think I asked at least at one time to not use mutes, just to make sure, because at a certain point, that's the only melodic material that we have. Everything else is accompaniment. So we need to hear that. And Another beautiful thing is the bass line. I mean, look at this, how he writes for the double bass. I mean, it's so beautiful.
Mm.
Just descending, descending, descending. And triple piano, well, again, depending on your basses, don't lose them. I mean, really make sure we hear that. They're not going to cover anyone, but they'll just, I find when the basses play a little louder, it's like the fan of the orchestra opens up, the sort of the tessitura opens up and we hear them. So make a big deal of those basses. That it is really beautiful. Now, before 18, I think is a very treacherous part. This is, I'll say 8 before 18. All of these little dum, dum. It's actually in a kind of surround sound. They come from all over. Like, oh, there's or actually yeah, almost like stars or something. That make sure you hear every single one of them, and trying to balance each other. It can get actually for a conductor it can get very muddlesome here. You're not really sure wait a minute, okay, where are we? Because it's made to just kind of evaporate. So be sure you have your score set up where you have some phrases marked in, right? Some phrases marked in. So you know what you're doing, but make sure every one of those little ones comes out. Sometimes English horn is a little hard to hear. And then the piccolo leads us into the end of the day. And this is where Respighi is such a genius and why I think this is his masterpiece. He started out in the mist of the morning and he leads us to like the stars of twilight. I mean,
Mm.
it's just one day. So this is 15 minutes of one day of beauty. And again, completely connected, just as real time is. It doesn't stop and now we have the twilight. And this is all all stars coming out. I mean, every harp, every celeste note is a star, and beautiful singing in the winds, the horn. Oh, I love this spot. I love this spot with the cellos and basses of bar five. I always bring that out. It's just such a gorgeous thing to hear. I mean, that sort of chorale, five voices in the bottom. So I treat it like a very melodic material. And it happens again, those kinds of things whenever it's a unusual sound. So we go from 4 into 2 at 19. Um, and yeah, it again can be a little bit confusing for people. So make sure that they see that you're in 2. This is one spot where I found that sometimes the orchestra, especially the people who, might not be playing everything, get a little bit disoriented between 18 and 19. So knowing that that's in 2, and again, it's just twice as slow, is very helpful for them. The flute is very important to hear before 20, 5 before 20. Let me mention something. If you look at the beginning of the flute solo, which is exactly 5 before 20, it just remember, it doesn't start on the C sharp. The solo has to warm up before it starts moving. So I often remind the winds, or or even strings, get ready. You sort of have to take over before you start moving. Like, all right, here I am now, now I'll move, but don't feel that you'll wait till you play the C sharp. And it depends on how experienced people are, but always warm up this sound before you play. So that this is nice with the solo. No, cellos have a beautiful part in this too. We go back to 4 at 21, a little bit faster. I mean, not much, but a little bit faster. This can be a little treacherous, um, but very, very beautiful. I think I changed. I don't know if it's a big deal, but after 21, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, um, the viola, the viola, G sharp should trill to an A sharp. I think we went to a lot of thought about that. So you might, not that it's the most important thing, but it's instead of an A natural. Yeah. And then I wouldn't slow down. I mean, he's built in a retard, a beautiful retard. So just keep going freely. This is the flute can also be free. I'm looking at after 21, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 after 21 can be very free. A lot of times I would try to say to them, people playing it for the first time, Respighi, how do you write down a bird song? How do you notate it rhythmically? It's impossible. But what he's doing is he's getting it as close as he can get it, and then the rest is up to the player. Okay, I can make my own version based on that. That's truly what he does in a lot of the Rome pieces. That it's his way of saying this is what the bird sounded like, and you continue. 22 is incredibly beautiful too, because this is truly when it's darkness is descending. I just because I thought 22 was so beautiful, the downbeat, I asked the flute to leave out that first ornament so that I could just settle on that, and then patim, but that's not right. But I told you I did it. So I mean, that's what I just love that effect where we just kind of settle together on the winds and the strings without the patim coming, only the first one. Here's another incredible spot. Before 23, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The violas, the cellos, and the basses. I mean, that kind of harmony in that register, close harmony. How often do we hear that in an orchestra? Very rarely. And it's a beautiful fabric. So sometimes I find it very hard to get soft enough before 23, so that the 2 bars before 23 on the violins really makes a diminuendo. And 23 then, let's be careful not to ask for, not to indicate sforzando too much. I mean, it seems like the wrong place to all of a sudden have an accent. But it can be weight. I mean, it's weight, weight, a little bit of weight or a little bit of heaviness, but nothing dramatic, and definitely nothing in the second bar of 23. You're going to find that people will play that louder, whether it's a bowing issue or just happens. Um, uh, this this cello bass thing at the end, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those 2 bars by themselves is incredible. Very warm. I always tell them very, very warm, very warm. And so that it's not in the distance. It's the last little warmth we have. And I usually tie them over the bar line so that there's not a lot of space. I also do that. You might try this sometimes in other places. Third bar of 23, tie over the bar line, the strings, tie over the bar line so that the cellos and basses actually cut them off. It's not like here are the upper strings and here come the lower strings. They morph into each other, right? So tie over the bar line. And I do that with the cello and bass, which I always have liked. And then it's over. I mean, then it's dark. And so, and just the seconds need a lot of encouragement to just play by themselves for a very long time. And I always tell them, just keep playing, but you don't all have to play. If you're at the end of your bow, just stop. But everyone else, if you have a little more bow left, keep playing. I mean, the softer and the more interesting it can be with just people stopping playing when they finally out of bow. That's good. But you have to encourage them to do it. I mean, it's a magical piece. I have to say that I think of the 3, as I think I said, I think this is the masterpiece because of the connection. I mean, the unity of it, the idea of one day, and going back and forth in time in several of the movements, really back and forth in time to ancient Rome, and simply the extraordinary color of the writing. I mean, it's amazing.
I don't want
But
to
no,
stop
go
you
ahead.
at all, but we do have to get to Pini di Roma,
I know. I'll do
and
what I can. I'll do what I
we'll
can.
see how we can get through that as well. But before we go on to the Fontana to Pini, regarding the Fontana, we have a question from Anastasia Vadiakova, who wants to know: do you make any kind of specific gestures to show the difference between the sections, where you're talking about different times of the day and how it is trying to portray the different fountains? For Neptune, are you more majestic with your gesture? For the evening stars, are you a little bit more fluid and horizontal with your gestures, or pointed? How do your gestures show the different
Absolutely.
sections?
Well, my gestures really show the sound that I'm hoping to achieve. But the sound that I'm hoping to achieve, like in the stars, the kind of hazy but pointed sound from some instruments, my gestures are based on how to achieve that. But you're absolutely right. And even when those horns come in the second movement, I mean, the orchestra should just jump out of their seat. So yes, I mean, you're going to give ram da dum and then start again. Yeah, why not? Because I mean, I know there were some of the deepest and most profound conductors of the past didn't do gestures like this, but I think when you're trying to have a full panoply of sounds, you need to do that. Just make sure you're always doing your gesture for the sound, not for the audience, but for the sound. That's
Brava.
what in the end, that's what it's all about. It's the sound. Okay,
And speaking
so
of sound, in Pini di Roma,
oh my gosh, well, this is great.
you have so much sound, including some birds that are on a recording,
That's right.
and
That's right.
trumpets on
That's
a
right.
balcony, and
Well,
maybe
this is probably
you can give
everybody's
us a little bit
favorite.
more of
I'll just give
a
a
summarized version of
summary,
this.
right? Well, the fountains is actually in many ways less detailed. I think less detailed in some ways than the pines, less than the fountains. But we start out with just a lot of sound, and this is children playing at the Villa Borghese, and probably in his time. It's not really going back to the past yet. So it's a lot of sound. The big thing about this movement, and I want to caution you about it, remember, it doesn't have trombones, but it has a lot of sound. Try and take advantage of differences, because otherwise you can wind up playing this entire movement fortissimo from beginning to end and not changing the tempo at all. And that's not generally good. So let me suggest the beginning. Of course, we start with that fortissimo. That's good. Pull back after 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, wherever it is. Yeah, to make that crescendo. Pull back, actually clear it. If you don't clear the fortissimo in this movement, it actually becomes tiring. 2, I think a little slower tempo is a good idea. Just don't go barreling into 2. Set it up to take advantage of the woodwind solos by a slightly slower tempo there. Make up for it 5 bars later. You can you can move a little bit there. One spot that I would strongly encourage you to play mezzo piano rather than forte is before 3, 8 before 3. Otherwise, again, it's like forte, forte, and more forte. Just give yourself a chance to come back and move it into forte again. So again, take your time. I put a mezzo piano for myself, 8 before 3, and then crescendo. So, and then this piano before 4, 10 bars. Very, very important. Very important. You know, the downbeat of the strings here doesn't have to be fortissimo. I mean, it doesn't have to be. I mean, we'll get the sense of arrival, and the clarinets can play fortissimo. The winds can play fortissimo. It's more important that is soft. I would even say have them play piano right from the beginning. Now we have a beautiful oboe, but keep it soft, keep it soft. Then there's a little crescendo to 4. This is my main worry for you in this is not varying the dynamics enough. Before 5 is another very important spot where it says stringendo. Come back to mezzo piano. I really advise that, or else it's just a lot of forte. One other little thing to be careful of at 5 is that can be very difficult for the trumpets. And I've been with orchestras where I've decided to do it in 2 at that point, because I'm in 1 before. And then all of a sudden, and it worked very well. It worked very well. Sometimes the trumpet players preferred it in 1, but it's a little easier, I think, if you go into there, just so that they can have something solid to play against. All right, then it's I'll just rush through this. Here, 6, I always come down to mezzo forte. And now this is interesting because it's a brand new tempo. It's a brand new tempo, and there's no way to prepare it. So let me suggest this to you, and it will sound maybe odd. Stop conducting 1 before 6. Stop conducting. So you're conducting in 1, nothing. So you stand still on that bar. No one's going to stop playing. I mean, if they get confused, if your concertmaster says, "What'd you do?" Say, "No, don't worry, just play, just finish it." 1, 1, yeah, and then you can give that. Yeah, you can't really give yeah, if without not conducting. I think it really works. It might sound surprising, but just stop on the downbeat. Stop moving on the downbeat of 1 before 6. Set up the new tempo. I changed 7 to pianissimo for all. Just hear the trumpets. It's actually very hard to hear them. And it looks like it shouldn't be, but it's not easy. Pianissimo, and then instead of forte, 5 after 7, mezzo piano, and then crescendo, crescendo, crescendo. So again, and I come back the final, sort of getting towards the end, 4 before 8. I would strongly suggest coming back to piano and making a crescendo again. I mean, I think the piece has a lot more charm if it's not so loud. I think I read a thing about when Respighi the first time was played. Was it in Carnegie Hall? It was booed by the audience. The first piece, they just thought it was like Cacophony. What is this piece? I mean, they actually booed by the audience, but and it would never be booed now. It's brilliant. But I think that just varying the dynamics helps.
Mhm.
Now, this one again goes right into the catacombs. So we're going from Italy of his time into the ancient Rome. I do a funny thing here that I'll tell you about quickly. I ask the violas and basses to start playing 2 bars before that first note. Very softly, nobody hears them. They just sort of see them moving, and then all of a sudden you're in the second movement, and that sound is there.
Mhm.
And then you start conducting that. It's like we fell into the catacombs instead of stopping and then starting the sound of the catacombs. Why not let it be there? I mean, just something to think about. You could conduct 10 and the other spot before, I mean, 1 before 10 or 5 before 10. Try conducting it with your left hand so people don't get confused about, well, where is she or where is he? Just conduct that with the left hand and then go on with your right hand. So those exist kind of freely. You just help them. Um, yeah, I'm just thinking, was there anything else critical? Oh, the trumpet, the trumpet is very difficult because the trumpet should not be on stage with you. Um, we had our trumpet player beneath our stage. He was underneath the stage. So he sounded like he was in the catacombs, which is what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be the dead soul who's still singing that ancient Christian hymn down in the catacombs. So that's a good spot to do it. Yeah, I mean, I guess I've done it once with the trumpet up in the balcony. I don't think that's as good a spot or off stage, but it's not easy you have to really practice it with the strings. So basically the trumpet does the same thing every time and the strings memorize how the trumpet is moving. Yeah, this 5/4 looks like it could be easy, but it is not. Just be very, very steady, very, very steady through. I'm trying to go fast again. Yeah. Oh, then the Pines of the Juniculum. This is incredible.
Can I
And
ask you a question about the Ancora più mosso? Do you recommend when they have the tenuto that they play um, more alla corda, more on the string when
yes,
they're making the
yes,
sottovoce? Mhm.
yes, absolutely, absolutely,
Without really
absolutely.
separating so much between
Without
them.
really separate. So it says like a psalm, right? So and you have to tell them that, or else you get something like da 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 da, and that's not it. It's da 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 da. You mentioned his wife. His wife was a specialist in Gregorian chant, and so he learned all of that from his wife. This is like a Gregorian chant, so it's very much da 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 da. And and singing. All of this is singing in the trombones. They have so much beautiful singing things. I mean, it's a religious hymn. Um, when the Pines of the Juniculum come, I think this is quite free. Again, you just go right into the third movement, um, and then I give the downbeat for the second bar, and I make a big 4 just to show the entrance of the strings, and I get to the third bar, leaving the piano completely free. The piano does whatever they want, right? They just start with us and they can take whatever time they want. I mean, if they're too slow or too fast, you can advise, but just leave them alone, and then leave the clarinet totally alone too. You go in, you simply at 13, you cut off the double basses, although they probably will know to do that once they hear the clarinet. If you really know the orchestra and spend some time with them, I wouldn't even conduct 13 for 3 bars. So it's truly just the clarinet singing. That's the nightingale. The clarinet is singing, and then bring in the strings. The strings move again. Don't beat anything. Again, you have to feel comfortable with the orchestra to do this. 5 after 13. Don't beat anything for 4 bars, and then start when the violins start moving. The idea is that everyone is focused only on the clarinet, and it's one of the greatest moments for clarinet in the literature. This can be sticky, these rhythms. You have to be a little careful. Watch out before 15. Don't let them crescendo. Don't let them crescendo. The clarinet is still dolcissimo, right? So, I mean, don't let them cover the clarinet. And again, just keep it very soft and let the clarinet end on his own. Oh, this is really amazing. Okay, let's rush a little bit. Um, um, yeah. Oh, just one thing at the end, and I advise this, although I know cellos seem to like to do this. The cellos have to retune before they play the beat that you see right at the begin, 4 bars before the beginning. See, the cellos are playing a note that they have to retune their instruments for. I would advise to just let the double basses play that. They are not playing anything. The double basses then that we won't miss anything because the double basses in the Pini the Via Appia are still going to be covering that B. They're always going to be covering that B, and it's easier. But I have to say, when I said our last time we did it in Buffalo, and the cello said, "No, we like to retune." So okay, they retuned and then they retuned again. So up to your orchestra, but if it seems like it's easy, I think it's very nice with the basses just playing the B. Now this is the big one, and this is truly in ancient Rome, and in the what they're hearing are the footsteps of an army. This is at dawn. It's before dawn. Before dawn, they're hearing the footsteps of an army, and they can tell it's an army because they can actually feel the ground shaking, even though they know they're probably 10 miles away. There's so many people walking that they know it's an army and they know it's coming in their direction. What they don't know is what army is it? Is it the Visigoths, or they don't know. They know their army is at war. So they're hoping it's their army, but they don't know. So there's a real feeling of like, oh my God. I mean, even starting from the bass clarinet, very soft, the horns. I mean, the sound should be like, oh, what's happening? Oh, and even this in the second violins, the violas. This is fear. I mean, it's still soft, but this is fear. They don't know who it is. The most moving thing is the English horn. It's like a woman's voice singing, but the English horn it's very filled with anxiety. Again, everyone is worried. Now, I also think very much that his going in the English horn, you know where I am, this is before 19, is reproducing a rhythm that he can't quite write out. So I always say to them, especially going from 4 to 5 to 6, like 2 before 19, they go from the 16ths to quintuples to like sextuples, is just it's just getting faster. Like what are we going to do? Or something like that. Not rhythmic. I mean, these people are terrified at this point. Even when the English horn screams out at that mezzo forte, again, it's fear. It's fear. It's fear. There's a big moment, not to miss at 19, when the B becomes a B flat. It's like that's a big shift. You want to bring that out. But then we go on, and the the army band in Rome at 20 has this idea. Let's play and see what happens. So they play at 20. That's the band in Rome. And then they hear from maybe 5 miles away now, a band playing back at them, the same music. So they're thinking, well, maybe we'll try it again. They try it again. Here they are. They play it one more time. And then even louder when they take off the mutes. This is before 21. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Their army coming home plays back at them. And that is one of the greatest moments. This 21 is like the extreme expression of joy. And this is from everyone. Their sons are coming home, their husbands, their brothers, they're coming home. It's the Roman army. So it's just at the end of that, it's like, it's overwhelmingly joyful. And um, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't go on. It's all little details, but I think knowing that gives you a feeling of how important it is to have that group of brass in your balcony, if you can possibly do it. So people get the idea, oh, they're coming closer, and then there's kind of a reunion, but to be continued, I guess. But anyway, I know I mustn't keep you any longer, but
Well, no, I mean, you've got everybody hanging on every one of your words, and this is just fascinating, Joann. And I mean, thank you so much. Look, I do have some comments that I'd like to make, and I know
yes,
you'll have
please, John.
some answers about them. And some people have also asked some questions about the score and about rehearsal planning. On one of the conductors, Andrea Solinas, he has asked about the rehearsal, how you would organize the rehearsal for a piece like this. I mean, after all, you have to bring in that organ at some point. And when does the
Right.
organ actually show up for your rehearsals? Do you wait till your dress rehearsal for the organ when you're in the hall? Do you happen to have an organ when you're in your rehearsal room? For the banda playing in the balcony,
Right,
how do you
right.
organize that for the rehearsal? What would you recommend for somebody who's doing this piece for the first time, how they would organize their rehearsal for this?
Well, I would say just in general, don't save anything for the dress rehearsal, because the dress rehearsal should be your concert in a way. It's
Right.
our concert, the orchestra and the conductor's concert, just to make sure everyone is, you can all of a sudden have like the organist come in and realizing that the organ is a quarter tone flat, or that you can't tell how loud it is, and everyone of your assistants is like cowering. It's so loud out there. So don't wait till the end. But do be very careful about who you tell to come to what rehearsal. Generally, I don't have the banda come to the first rehearsal. There's enough to do without the banda being there. But go through everything with your main orchestra, and then very clearly say the second night, let's start with the banda. And the banda, put them up there. I mean, I think it's important to get them up in the balcony right away. Have somebody help you if you can get somebody to sort of be in the middle of the house, feeling that they're what you will find with the banda is you'll find that the people in the house in the balcony often will be reacting late.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a great bravery, and I'm going to tell you, those people up there have to be heroes. You don't want to hire a timid high school kid to do that. Or maybe I should say high school kids will just do it. They won't be worried. But it takes a lot of bravery to come playing in that, when you're just the four trumpets or two trumpets playing at a time. I would
Right.
also suggest, when you choose who plays there, that make it four trumpets and two trombones. You don't have to, and I have also myself done it with two trumpets, two horns, and two trombones. I don't think it works as well, because the horns are placed differently. Do you know that they're playing backwards? It just doesn't have the same character. If you can use four trumpets for the banda and two trombones, I think it works most solidly.
Do you control the recording of the birds, or you
No,
let the house
no,
do that?
the house does it. Usually it's done by no, well, yeah, we used to be done by a percussionist. I don't know if now it's on it, it used to come on a record.
Right.
Used to come on a record. And then it went on to a sort of
You had that
a
grating
tape, and
sound of
yeah,
the
oh
needle
my
going.
gosh. But now it's a file, a computer file,
Yeah.
and it is based on what Respighi wanted. I mean, it's the same Nightingale that he used. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of amazing. I'm not sure if this is true, John. Maybe you know. Someone told me that it's the first example of extra musical sound used in a piece.
First time a gramophone is used as an instrument in a piece. Yes, that's
Yeah, yeah,
correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but all of that is totally fun. It's totally fun.
Let me
It's
ask you
really
about
totally
some
fun.
specific. There's a question again from one of the
Yeah.
conductors. They have some specific questions in the score. In your first part about
Yes.
the for the Pini di Roma, five measures after number five. Do you conduct on one with subdividing or on three? This is five measures after number five.
Oh, let me just find it. A one or in three?
Or
No,
in three.
I stay in one. I stay, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, after my trumpets, I just do that for the trumpets. I just stay in 2 for the trumpets. Then I go back in 1 for 3 bars. And then I kind of get ready in the next bar to go back in 2
And then
for the
back into 2.
trumpets.
And
Yes,
how do you
thank you.
neatly cut off the tutti before part 2?
Before second movement, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I always like to
Do
look
you
at it
cut
when
off the
I'm.
tutti before?
No, I don't think it's necessary. They just play by dee da da da, and it
Mhm.
stops. But that's where the moment they stop, we are already playing. If people like that idea, we're already playing the catacomb sound. No, I wouldn't cut them off. If they, I just as a point, I think if you don't need to cut people off, it's not necessary. Dee da da da, dee da da da. And then it stops, but sometimes usually you have to cut people off when the time value is a question, like how long should we hold this? Oh, yeah, okay, we're cutting off. But this one they just play. I don't think it's necessary.
Good. Next question that is posed is part 2, measures 5 and 9. How are you conducting that? Can you give us a demonstration?
Dee da dee 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 da dee dee dee. So I
So you're
conduct 5 beats. I usually put a fermata in the middle beat. So the strings play, and I'm just looking at the horns. And then my first beat to them is their first note, and I'm conducting the quarters.
Mhm.
So da da dee dee da 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 dee dee dee. If you don't like that little stretching, you don't have to do that. Same thing, but I do this one in one tum 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 team ta ti ta tum, stopping on 5 ti ta ta team ta ta tum. You don't even need here to worry about pattern. I mean, you don't have to worry, okay, what's the pattern for 9? There's no pattern. It's
It's
it's a
just a
little bit
gesture.
like it's just a gesture, like as if you were conducting a Gregorian chant. Everyone's playing the same rhythm. You're just giving them a gesture. But I mentioned with the left hand so that there's no confusion of where are we in the rest of the orchestra.
Good. And last question she's asked is part 3 at
Mhm.
rehearsal number 17, bar 4. So there's the third movement. Number 17, bar 4, asking, do you cue the clarinet intro or the downbeat of the next bar? As you were talking
Um,
about.
yes, I never cue the clarinet. I mean,
Just let them play.
every clarinetist in the world knows when it's the right time to play.
Right.
And it's very clear because the piano plays ya da 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 dee da da da. And for this conductor, I would suggest let the strings keep playing. Let them still have that something going on there, just the strings. The moment the clarinet comes in, they're off. So
Right.
again, it's not a hole. So you don't have to do anything. In fact, I just follow the clarinet, but here I do follow. I should say this because this is very treacherous. This is before the end 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I show the downbeat very clearly of 13. This is for all the strings that are counting. And then very clearly the downbeat of the next bar. Then
Mhm.
very clearly that, and then bring in the first entrance of the violins. One hint about this, make sure you know what stand you're looking at because it's not coming from the first stand. These are all different stands. So make sure you know what's happening and where it's coming from, just for
That's
your
great
own
advice.
feeling of, yeah. So yeah, sometimes it's so much better to trust someone, your soloist like the clarinetist, or if you don't need to cue, let them take their time. Maybe that read just feels good at that moment and they go.
And would you recommend that you do some sectional rehearsals for pieces like this, or is it better to keep it in the full orchestra throughout?
It depends. I mean, some orchestras don't like to do sectionals because they feel we're professionals. We did this before, and then they best not to hurt their feelings. But I think if a group has never played this, let's say a young group, and I can guarantee you that all of the brass and winds would be happy to have a sectional, and probably the strings as well, because there's a lot of confusing things in here. Again, it looks easier than it is, but
There's also
you
something
can't
else.
do that with a professional orchestra. You can't suggest
Yeah.
that. It just might hurt their feelings. So
And there's something else other than it's not necessarily confusing as it is in terms of interpretive presentation. You know, as time stands still and all roads lead to Rome, here we are having a presentation of this imperial image of Rome. We must also take into account that Respighi composed during a time of fascism in Italy. And he was accused, even though we certainly wasn't, he was accused of his music being used for propaganda. In the same way that one might say that Copeland was used for propaganda to promote the New Deal and the expansion of America during Roosevelt's time. How important is it for a conductor to be conscious of these extra musical aspects of the piece in the way that you interpret the music so that the audiences, should they be Italian or should they be American or should they be any other audience that isn't necessarily exposed to the historical narrative of the composer and of the story of the music, that they wouldn't be confused by it? How important is it that the conductor knows about these extra musical narratives of the music?
I think it's very important that you know about them, but you can't certainly blame any of these composers for what their music was used for and say, it exists as pure and noble music. But it's good to know that. And frankly, if you do ever do, and I'm sure a lot of you do, pre-concert talks where you get a very intelligent audience who really wants to know more, and you want to share something like that with them. So, in Copeland's music, much to his horror, was sometimes used in American propaganda films, which he would never have approved of. Or certainly Respighi wouldn't have wanted to know that, but it's interesting for them maybe to know that if you feel like you want to share that with them. And I think you'll find that in these pre-concert talks that you will give, the more information you can give people, the more they love the music. I mean, these are in many cases very intelligent and very well read and very well educated people. They just might not know much about music, but that's why they're coming to you. They want you to tell them. So tell
And
them
so
those
much of what
stories.
you've given us makes us love this music even more. Joann, we can't thank you enough. I mean, the comments that I've gotten from people, this really was an extraordinary masterclass for everyone to discover and rediscover these masterpieces. And I can tell you, the next time I'm going to be conducting Respighi, I'm going to be remembering a lot of what you've said and what you've shared. And I know everybody who will be discovering and rediscovering this music again will refer back to the video that will come from this, that will
Oh,
be
excellent.
available on YouTube and on the CMO website, and everybody can refer to it. It's free, don't worry. And we can all enjoy, once again, to hear the information that you've shared. Joann, I can't thank you enough. Really, this has
Well,
been a
let,
marvelous
let,
experience, and I hope to.
thank
I'm
you.
going to be listening to your recording tonight, just
Well,
to go through with the scores again.
thank you, John, and thank you all. It was great delight for me to talk about pieces that I love. So I know you will conduct these works, and I know you'll love them just as much. So thank you very much, and best wishes to all of you.
Ladies, everybody's writing. This was exceptional. Thank you so much. We love you, Joann. Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Thank
Bye
you
bye,
very much,
everyone. Thanks
Maestris.
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Don't
you.
forget,
Thank you,
tomorrow
Master.
night, Frederic Chaslen will also be discussing Puccini for the 2024 Puccini Centenary. Don't forget to sign up, sign in. It's going to be wonderful. La Boheme in Tosca. See you all tomorrow. Ciao, ciao.